Now, let me share something else with you just before we go on. I want to lay out a few things for you, and I don't usually do this, but I want to kind of go through just a few small prophecies to indicate to you this very important point. And we often do this in Jewish evangelism. I've done this over in Israel. And that is this: if Jesus of Nazareth is not the Messiah, then every promise in the Bible with regard to the Messiah has failed, because it can no longer be fulfilled. Let me just read a few things that I've gathered over the years. First of all, just listen to this. According to Genesis 49:10, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh, a reference, ancient reference, to the Messiah, until he comes. Now, what is it saying? The scepter shall not depart from Judah. It shall not. Judah shall reign until Messiah comes. But here's the promise. This promise that a descendant of Judah would reign until the coming of the Messiah. In 70 A.D., the city of Jerusalem was destroyed. The political dominion and authority of the Jews was taken away, and the nation was scattered. For nearly 2 millennia, there has been no ruler from the tribe of Judah. If Jesus is not the Christ, then God's promise in Genesis 49:10 has failed, for the time is past and it can no longer be fulfilled. It's an absolute impossibility. Now, according to Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 through 27, the city of Jerusalem was to be rebuilt 7 weeks of years, that's 49 years, after the end of the captivity. And the Messiah would appear 62 weeks of years, that's 434 years, after the rebuilding of Jerusalem. This prophecy coincides perfectly with the life of Jesus. If Jesus is not the Christ, then God's promise in Daniel has failed, because the time has passed, the days have run out, and there's no longer any opportunity for it to ever happen again. Both Malachi chapter 3 and Haggai chapter 2 teach that the Messiah was to come while the second temple was still standing. The second temple was destroyed in 70 A.D. So if Jesus is not the Christ, the Messiah is never coming. The Messiah was to be a son or descendant of David, and he was to come at a time when the house of David was in low estate and held in contempt, like a tree that had been cut off to its very roots. In Isaiah 11:1, the scriptures declare, "Then a shoot will spring up from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit." Jesus appeared as the Messiah in such a time. If he is not the Messiah, then the scriptures cannot be fulfilled. For even the root of Jesse now has been pulled up with the destruction of the temple in 70 A.D. At that time, when the temple was destroyed in 70 A.D., all genealogical evidences were destroyed, and it would now be impossible to prove the Messiah's lineage. According to Daniel 9:27, the Messiah would confirm the new covenant and put an end to the sacrificial system under the old covenant. The sacrificial system ended with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. If Jesus is not the Christ, then the sacrificial system has ended without the coming of the Messiah. And finally, according to the prophet Isaiah, the Messiah's coming would be marked by an ingathering of the nations, or the Gentiles. For nearly 2,000 years, a countless multitude of Gentiles from every nation on earth has identified themselves with the God of Israel through the so-called Messiah, just as the scriptures predicted. Jesus is the Messiah. And the Messiah was not just a man. Even the ancient Jewish scribes held him to be more than a man, that when he came, the son of David would be greater than David, and that he would be Lord of David, that he would be divine, that he would be God that became man. And that's exactly what happened. Now,